Good afternoon everyone, and welcome back to the channel. So we're back with the second part of falsehoods that CS students still believe upon graduating. So we'll be continuing on from point 51 onwards, and it doesn't really matter if you haven't seen the first part, but if you want to go see that, I'll put a link up in the corner there, so if you want to go check that out, go click on that. So if you're new to the channel, remember to subscribe and ding the little bell icon down below because it'll really help the channel out. I'm trying to hit 100 subs by the end of the month at this point, and we're getting absolutely close to doing it. So any help would be really appreciated. Now that's out of the way, let's get started. So we're going to jump right in at point 51. So the last thing that we talked about was about temp files. So, okay, but in general using temp files is easy and risk-free. So a problem with temp files is that they're effectively a point of shared memory, and what that causes is if you have two applications that reference the same temp file, you're going to be creating race conditions. So if you haven't done concurrency before, basically a race condition is where you have two programs trying to access the same bit of memory, and they are racing to update and read from it. And what's going to happen there is one of them is going to be reading the old data and one's going to read the new data, and that may cause some issues. And there's some other issues that could happen with using temp files, like one application could delete the temp file or something else like that. After a fork, the parent always executes first. I haven't done enough C or anything that works with fork to actually say anything about that, so I'm not sure. I would assume that they both start at the same time and whichever one starts first. Malloc always returns a valid pointer. Malloc lets you allocate a block of memory, or a chunk of memory, I guess. And I assume that if you don't have memory to allocate, then it will fail. Main takes two arguments, argc and argv. This is more C stuff I'm not sure about myself. Once again, going back to the first point, you know C and C++. I don't. I at least admit that I'm a web developer and I am not comfortable with those languages. If you see a process with the same PID you saw previously, that means it's the same process. So the PID is the little ID that's assigned to every single program that runs, and they will get recycled when you need to recycle them. So if it has the same PID, it's very likely that it could be a different program. If you get a permissions error, chmod 777. If it works, it works. Setuid means the program has root privileges. I'm not sure about that one. I would have to look into that one afterwards. File deletion requires write permissions on the file. Doesn't it? I thought it did. I guess not. Okay, well that's news to me. Race conditions are only rarely triggered. Do any database work. Anytime you do any database work and you have multiple clients trying to access it, the database is there to stop the race conditions from happening. And you do any threaded work and you're going to have race conditions. Object-oriented programming is the best and most common programming paradigm. I would have thought that it would be the most common, but if you're going to include the systems that are deployed, I guess then you would have C being the most common language, because C is the most common language for embedded systems. OO is definitely not the best paradigm, but I would have thought it would be the most common, at least among the number of developers who use it. But I could be wrong there. Using a custom-written vector class makes your program object-oriented. Well, it could be a data-oriented vector class, or it could be a procedural vector class. Vector doesn't necessarily have to be object-oriented. I don't know where that point's even coming from. Dropbox is a suitable backup solution. Absolutely not. If you're going to back up on the cloud, at least use more than one. Don't rely on one service, because as we mentioned in the previous video, AWS isn't reliable, Dropbox is not going to be reliable, Netflix isn't reliable, everything in the cloud is not reliable. That's not to say that local stuff is, it's just that being on the cloud isn't some magic fix-all for hardware reliability. They can't be hacked or phished because they understand computers. If you think that, you're an idiot. Plain and simple. You could accidentally put your key into a site that looks legit, or you could have, I don't know, someone else use your system and then they get a keylogger put on your system and then you use that and you don't know about it. You can get hacked, obviously. Or you could have a password that gets leaked, or you could have a password that got cracked because they used a dictionary attack on it or something. Just because you know about computers doesn't mean that you can't get hacked, obviously. That's a ridiculous statement. They think they understand computers. I think I understand computers enough to use them on a daily basis. But if you mean understanding how a CPU works, I know a general idea of how it functions, but if you're like, can you write me some assembly to run on the x86 architecture? I have no idea how to do that. And the same is true for doing anything with GPU work or how pretty much anything in the system works. I know at a abstracted level how to use it, but at that core component level, I don't have any idea. Most of the lessons they need to learn are behind them. Absolutely not. That's the case with any field. As soon as you go out into industry, you're going to learn more and more and more. Anyone who thinks they know everything they need to learn is absolutely arrogant. Spreadsheets and PowerPoints are for business majors. I really wish that was true, and I really wish that more businesses didn't use Excel as a database, but they do, so you got to kind of work with it. And there's also things like having to present whatever your software design is to a board of stakeholders. You're going to need to know how to actually make PowerPoints. You're going to need to know how to use spreadsheets. Here we go. Here's some more stuff that made me want to actually make a video on this article. Elon Musk is a genius. Probably. I don't know. He seems pretty smart. I don't know how you would define a genius. I think he's smart. I think he's probably what you would classify as a genius. This is probably a bit of the writer's bias coming off. I actually missed one. Programmers spend most of their time programming. So this is actually a very common misconception that a lot of people have. When you go and do development work within a team, a lot of your time is actually going to be spent doing design work or communicating with your team, trying to work out exactly what you're going to do, or just doing thought work, trying to think through a problem. You can't write the code for a solution if you haven't actually thought it through. And a lot of that time, you are going to be spending just thinking about, how do I solve this? And that's one of the things that a lot of people don't really understand, especially a lot of managers don't understand. You're going to be spending productive time where you're not actually technically doing your job, really. Zuck is a genius. I don't know why anyone thinks Zuck is a genius. He made an app to rate girls in his college, and then it became Facebook one day. Steve Jobs was successful because, not in spite of being a jerk, so he was successful because he was a jerk. I feel like there's probably some part of that, but I don't really know. I don't know how Apple functions. Maybe it succeeded in spite of him being a jerk, but I don't know how it would have changed at this point if he wasn't. The ad-driven profit model is a necessary but reasonable trade-off to make the world a better place. Who in the world thinks that? Ad-driven is a fairly solid model, but people will make arguments for donation-driven, and I don't know. I'm not an economist. Someone tell me which is better. I think that a healthy balance of both is probably a good idea, especially if we're not going to do a lot more monetarily costed software, I guess. So software, you actually have to pay for it. Software engineering is a meritocracy because computers do what you tell them. What does that mean? Wait, what? Software engineering is a meritocracy because computers do what you... What? I don't know what to say about that. Software engineering is probably more meritocratic than some other disciplines, but not because of this. Technology and algorithms are neutral. Neutral in what respect? What does that mean? Success implies talent. Well, just look at a lot of the celebrities who have gotten famous from making certain tapes on the internet. That's all I will say, because I don't want my channel to get yeeted. Failure implies fault. Failure is a way for you to learn from your mistakes. Yes, you should obviously be aiming not to fail, but when you do, you should just get back up, learn what you did, and try not to do it again. And try to improve yourself from that. HBO's Silicon Valley is satire, not a documentary. I don't have anything to say about that. It's pretty accurate to the real world. Jokes about recursion are funny jokes about... I'm not even going to say anything about that. The humanities requirements were a waste of time. Yeah, they probably were if you had to do them. Depends on what they were. Some of them are probably useful, but I imagine a lot of them probably are a big waste of time. They will use a lot of math in their career. Depends on what you're doing. If you're doing things like data science, then yeah. But if you're going to be a web developer and you're going to do some, like, I'm going to make a storefront for selling my horses on to people in Romania. I don't know. If that's what you're doing, no, maths doesn't really matter. But data science and things where you're crunching a lot of numbers, yeah, having some understanding of the actual algorithms is a good idea. All traffic on the internet is UDP or TCP? No, obviously. DNS traffic always uses UDP. I don't know enough about web backend stuff to say anything about that. Once again, don't really know much about this. ICMP is only used for ping and traceroute. I'm not sure ICMP is actually used for. If Google uses it, then your company should use it. Google uses a massive NoSQL database for categorizing their indexes of every website on the internet. No, you shouldn't be using that for hosting your, or for storing your data on your Romanian horse shop. If Facebook does it, then it's okay for your company to do it too. It is if you want to get a lawsuit. If it's younger than 5 years old, it's a fad. No, it could be an emerging technology. If it's older than 5 years, it's obsolete. C++, JavaScript, React, computers. Need I say more? I don't know what to do. Ignore what just happened there. Using Lambda and Python is a good idea because it shows others you have a CS degree and understand the Lambda calculus. I don't know what Lambda calculus is, but if you want to use Lambdas, go ahead. Rewriting the algorithm to use red-black trees is worth the time. Rewriting algorithms is almost never worth the time. If there is an algorithm for it, just use it. Just use the library for it because it's probably going to be just as quick as you could possibly write it. And it's honestly probably going to be quicker, and it's going to have less bugs in it. They will encounter Huffman coding at least once in their career after college. Huffman coding is a way to encode data in a way that's much smaller than other formats. I can't exactly remember what Huffman coding was. Let's bring up the page that is here. Is it gonna... What's it gonna be? It's gonna be the Wikipedia page. So it's a... Bring this up. Basically, it's a tree structure where you can store text, and it's much smaller than other formats, I guess. And if you're going to encounter it, you're probably going to encounter it within a library, but otherwise, you're probably not going to. Two people with a CS degree will have a very similar background and shared experience / knowledge. No, because you're going to be doing very different portfolio work. Like, I've got a mate who does some Android development, and I've got another mate who does networking stuff, and I've got another mate who sits down and plays Overwatch all the time. We're all going to have the same degree, but that doesn't mean we're all going to understand the same stuff. Algorithmic complexity and big O notation are used all the time in the real world. No, they're not. No one cares most of the time. Algorithmic complexity and O notation are never used in the real world. They're used sometimes, but yeah. Academia somehow is not the real world. It is absolutely not the real world. If you think it is, you have no idea what you're talking about. There is a real world. Go away. Stop. Brooks Law has exceptions. Brooks Law is, if I remember correctly, it's... Actually, I'm not even going to try to explain it. We'll just bring up the Wikipedia article. So, Brooks Law is an observation about software project management according to which adding manpower to a late software project makes it later. So basically, when you bring new people on, it's probably going to take much longer to finish the project. And that's because you have to train those people, get them used to the company lifestyle, all these things. And that's going to end up eating into your time, where you think that if you just drop in more people, they're going to be as efficient as the people that are already there. And that is never the case. So Conway's Law has exceptions. What is Conway's Law? Conway's Law is an adage stating that organizations design systems mirror their own communication structure. Yeah, no, they obviously will. You're going to design systems in a way that make them fit within your organization, even if you're not intending to do that. So Murphy's Law I have heard of? I can't remember what it is, though. Alright, Murphy's Law is an adage or epigram that is typically stated as anything that can go wrong will go wrong. Yes, it will. Even if you have the most planned out perfect project, something's going to go wrong, even if you don't think it will. This could never happen. It will happen. Nobody would enter that sort of data. They will enter that data. One great example is that there are people who don't have first names, and another one from my own life, I have a mate who, he always puts his middle name as his last name because he doesn't have a last name, and there's a lot of forms where you have to have a first name and a last name in there, so he just can't fill them out. And yeah, there's lots of things like that, and there's a famous story about a guy who is named Null, and if you know anything about computers, you can probably imagine what happens if you have someone named Null. And then the last point on this list is, this list is finite. It's definitely not finite. There is a lot more that could be added to this list. So, I think that is pretty much everything for this video. If you liked this video, remember to smash that like button and leave me a comment down below, let me know what you think. I wasn't intending for this to go over 2 parts, but looking at my recording now, it would have been about 35 minutes for the entire thing, so maybe someone would have sat down to watch that, but I reckon it's probably better for my SEO to split it and come up with some like fancy title to make you guys click on it. And if you're at this point, I don't really care if you click off now because you've been watching for 15 minutes. So if you're annoyed, let me know in the comment section down below. Boost my SEO even more. And also, remember to subscribe and ding the little bell icon down below because it'll really help the channel out. Up on that corner, I will have the playlist that this video will be in. I should probably know what it is, but I don't know because I'm recording this directly after the first part. So, I think that's pretty much everything for me, and I'm out.